Well, good morning. I'm David Green. Welcome back to Pastor Abilities. Today is Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. This year is flying by. Today we have a Bible study from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21. This is going to be helpful for pastors, preachers, teachers of the Bible who are preparing for a Palm Sunday lesson, and I think will be of interest to anybody who, well, all of the Christians especially, but anybody who is fascinated by the events that happened when Jesus entered into Jerusalem. Today, we're going to take a look through the text, and then I'm going to pull back and take an overview of things that were happening in Jerusalem and why after 30 years of preaching this text, I said I've got it wrong. And if I get to preach it again, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. And this is the first time I will get to preach this text since I had made that comment. So, first, a couple of quick housekeeping items. Let me pop this up here. Here's where we are. We're going into Holy Week now, and for Christian churches, this can be an exceptionally busy time of year. Very, very important for all preachers. Very, very important. Watch your sleep. You must get enough rest to maintain the energy to get through Holy Week because it ends at the high note. Think of it as 4 quarters of a football game. And it doesn't match out exactly like that time-wise, but you have Palm Sunday. The congregation where I serve has Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Sunday services. Now, I've been doing this a long time, and so writing sermons for me now is very different than it was years ago. I'm not going to lie. Often I preach sermons that I've written before, but that's okay because they were worth hearing once, they're worth hearing again, as one of my mentors instructed me. So Palm Sunday is going to be a big event, lots of celebrations. A lot of Christians love going from parade on Palm Sunday to celebration on Easter, but there's this week in the middle. This is where we have to land. So we have Palm Sunday. I'm calling this the last trip home. Spoiler alert, the last trip home for Jesus is not on Palm Sunday. It's going to happen at some point in the future. Same location. Stay tuned for more details. Maundy Thursday, called Maundy Thursday from the Latin word mandamus, a new commandment, mandamus novum, a new commandment I give to you. Jesus gives this new commandment on Thursday night when he is at table with his disciples in the upper room. Good Friday. This is the day of Jesus' death, followed by the resurrection on Easter Sunday. He is dead 3 days. He is in the tomb before sunset, so he's there on Friday, Saturday, and then comes out on Sunday morning. And so this is the celebration we have. So I say, think of it as 4 quarters of a football game. Be ready for Palm Sunday. Have a great celebration. Lots of churches will have kids procession, big wide open songs. It's a lot of fun. But then Maundy Thursday is more subdued. If you can, prepare your remarks for Maundy Thursday on Monday. Good Friday, you'll notice I'm calling it the last night. That's not a sermon so much as it is about 5 minutes or so of reflections on the events of Holy Week. In some of that, you will get an idea of what I'm doing in today's lesson. It's all tied together, quite honestly. And then Easter Sunday, be sure, especially if you have a sunrise service, that you get a good night's sleep on Friday and on Saturday. You must. An extra hour of sleep will mean more for your congregation than an extra hour of work preparing your sermon. Get a good night's sleep. That's some heads up for Holy Week. A quick 30-second overview of what's coming up after Easter. I'm using a lectionary text here, and the whole theme is faith. That's the theme I'm using to tie together from April 5th, Easter Sunday, through May 17th, which are the Sundays of Easter, May 24th, which in the United States is also our Memorial Day weekend. That is the day of Pentecost, and we'll worry about that later. But just so you know now, going through mostly New Testament text, well, actually half and half, 2 from the Gospel of Luke, then from Isaiah, 1 Peter, and then 2 from Psalms 66 and 68. That takes us through a theme of faith, childlike faith, blind faith. And I should also back up. April 12th is part of the Week of the Young Child. The National Association for the Education of Young Children has this week. You might hear it as Teacher Appreciation Week in your area, but those are not actually lectionary texts, but I think very important to have a Sunday set aside for young children. And that brings us now to the Bible study. This is really great stuff, and I'm going to take myself out of the picture here, hopefully not removing myself there. I should be able to hear me. So here we are, and this is the text as we find it in the Gospel of Matthew. Now, when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethpage, to the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. And if anyone says anything to you, you shall say, 'The Lord needs them,' and he'll send them at once." This took place to fulfill what was, well, actually, I'm going to stop right there. We're going to stop with that event because I think there's something very, very important here. Now, I live in Southeast Texas, outside of Houston. And this past weekend, we finished what was called the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. This is a huge event. Literally, millions of people show up at NRG Center to watch the rodeo, to enjoy the midway with games and really dreadfully bad for you food. And it is a lot of fun. But the signature events are livestock shows, especially for kids who participate in 4-H, showing their animals. And then they're auctioned off, and some of those animals are already in freezers around the area. The kids earn money for scholarships. So millions of dollars are given away for college scholarships. Well, 3 weeks before that was the San Antonio Livestock Show and Rodeo. In the few weeks before that was the Fort Worth Livestock Show and Rodeo. This is rodeo season here in Texas. It is also the season between the initiation of the siege at the Alamo and what we call San Jacinto Day. In its most beautiful time of year to live here. But all of that matters because you will find a donkey and a colt with her. And elsewhere we read that these animals have never had someone ride on them. That's not called a parade, that's called a rodeo. These animals do not naturally take to somebody riding on their back. And yet this is what happens in this event. Go and find them, say the Lord needs them, and he'll send them at once. And so that's how the event takes place here. But then we read, this is to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet. Okay, now I'm using the English Standard Version Study Bible for this particular text. I bought a new version of the Bible because I had so many highlights, it really got distracting. And that Bible is still the one I use when I'm reading. But anyway, I want you to see where this comes from. Notice the reference here takes you back to Zechariah chapter 9 and to Isaiah 62. Zechariah 9 and Isaiah 62. So we're going to go back and take a look at those. Those are very, very significant texts. Zechariah is one of the minor prophets, one of the book of the 12 last books in the Old Testament. As you can see from my screen, it is just before the end of the Old Testament. I wanted you to see that on that list there. Zechariah chapter 9, I'm going to read from the first verse. In the 8th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo, saying, "The Lord was very angry with your fathers." Excuse me, just a moment, a little technical difficulty there. All good now. "The Lord is very angry with your fathers. Therefore say to them, thus declares the Lord of hosts, return to me, says the Lord of hosts, and I will return to you, says the Lord of hosts." That's a powerful sentence for preaching right there. Return to me, I return to you. And notice how the Lord of hosts is brought in there twice. The name of the Lord is uber significant, very significant here. Don't be like your fathers, to whom former prophets cried. This is Zechariah, centuries before the arrival of Jesus. Don't be like your fathers who cried out to former prophets. Thus says the Lord of hosts, return from your evil ways and from your evil deeds. But they did not hear or pay attention to me, declares the Lord. This is not Zechariah. This is declares the Lord. Your fathers, where are they? The answer is they're dead and in the ground. Their bones might be in an ossuary somewhere, but there is no flesh. There is no flesh. And the prophets, do they live forever? No. But my words and my statutes, which I commanded my servants, the prophets, did they not overtake your fathers? So the people repented and said, as the Lord of hosts purposed to deal with us for our ways and deeds, so has he dealt with us. And it goes on from there. On the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month of Shabbat, in the second year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Zechariah. Notice now you're in a different prophetic word, but I wanted you to hear that. In the 8th month of the second year, now here you are on the 24th day of the 11th month. You've moved down the same year. Berechiah, the son of Edo, saying, I saw in the night, and behold, a man riding on a red horse. He was standing among the myrtle trees in the glen, and behind him were red, sorrel, and white horses. Then I said, what are these, my Lord? The angel who talked with me said to me, I will show you what they are. So the man who was standing among the myrtle trees answered, these are they whom the Lord sent to patrol the earth. They answered the angel of the Lord who was standing among the myrtle trees and said, we have patrolled the earth, and behold, the earth remains at rest. Then the angel of the Lord of hosts, how long will you have mercy on Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, against which you have been angry these 70 years? And the Lord answered gracious and comforting words to the angel who talked with me. So the angel who talked with me said to me, cry out. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I am exceedingly jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion. I am exceedingly angry with the nations that are at ease. For while I was angry but a little, they furthered the disaster. Therefore, says the Lord, I have returned to Jerusalem with mercy. My house shall be built in it, declares the Lord of hosts. And the measuring line shall be stretched out over Jerusalem. Cry out again, thus says the Lord of hosts, my cities again shall overflow with prosperity, and the Lord will again comfort Zion and again choose Jerusalem. The pivotal point, if you will, the fulcrum of these events takes place as these horses make their way into Jerusalem. This is a very, very significant event, and I'm realizing I'm still at Zechariah chapter 1. I need to skip forward here to Zechariah chapter 9. I'm sorry, Zechariah chapter 14. But I wanted you to see, I did want to see that first part of the word of the Lord coming to Zechariah to give you the time and place of history. Now, when we go to the last chapter of Zechariah, we're going to pick up again here. Behold, the day is, let me back up. I am jealous for Jerusalem. I am angry with these nations. You've had the horsemen making their way into town. Keep this in mind when you read the gospel accounts of Jesus coming into Jerusalem. Keep these in mind as you read the revelation in the accounts of what is to come at the end of time. Very, very significant text. Behold, a day is coming for the Lord, when the spoil taken from you will be divided in your midst. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, the houses plundered, and the women raped. Half the city shall go out into exile, but the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as when he fights on the day of battle. And on that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives. Did you get that? On that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives. Centuries before Jesus, that Mount of Olives exists, I suspect, much in the way that it has been preserved even today. The Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley, so that on one half of the mount shall move northward, the other half southward. And you shall flee to the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azal, and you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, the king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all his holy ones with him. On that day there shall be no light, cold, or frost. There shall be a unique day which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light. On that day, living waters shall flow out from Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea and half of them to the western sea. It shall continue in summer as in winter. And the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day, the Lord will be one and his name one. For those who say there is no witness of the triune nature of God apart from the New Testament text, the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day, the Lord will be one and his name one. The whole land shall be turned into a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, but Jerusalem shall remain aloft on its site from the gate of Benjamin to the place of the former gate to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the king's winepress. And it shall be inhabited, for there shall never again be a decree of utter destruction. Jerusalem shall dwell in security. And this shall be the plague with which the Lord will strike all peoples that wage war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they are standing on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. This is quite a prophecy. And if you begin here at verse 4, on this day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west. The Mount of Olives exists today, and I will show you images from the Mount of Olives taken of Jerusalem in just a few moments, but I wanted you to get this very important sense here of Zechariah's prophecy of what's going to happen in Jerusalem. And now you understand, keep in your mind that this is to fulfill what was said by the prophet Zechariah. We have the clue that Jesus at Bethpage is starting the day on the Mount of Olives. Very, very important for the sequencing of events, not just on Palm Sunday, the Triumphal Entry, but for the events that are to come in the days ahead within Jerusalem. That Jesus begins on the Mount of Olives is critically important. Critically important. Let's go back now to Matthew 21. Let me get this up here. My apologies here. Back. Here we are. There's the right spot. All this took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet. Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey. So we had this first reference here to Zechariah chapter 9. The second reference is to Isaiah chapter 62. Isaiah chapter 62. And so we're going to take a look there also. Isaiah in the Old Testament is with the major prophets. You see Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Daniel. They are major in the sense that each one commands its own scroll. Isaiah, arguably, very effectively, is more likely three separate writings over a period of time which are collected under the name of Isaiah. Not to say that they're not authentic, but they have a fascinating history, a well-documented history in how they get to us. Isaiah chapter 62. I'm going to read verses 1 through 12 and then go back to verse 10. For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake, I will not be quiet until her righteousness goes forth as brightness and her salvation as a burning torch. The nations shall see your righteousness, and all the kings your glory, and you shall be called by a new name that the mouth of the Lord will give. You shall be a crown of beauty in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the hand of your God. You shall no more be termed forsaken, and your land shall no more be termed desolate. But you shall be called, my delight is in her, and your land married. For the Lord delights in you, your land shall be married. For as a young man marries a young woman, so shall your sons marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you. And again, hang on to these verses when you read through the Revelation, because the big finish here involves the church being married, the church being married, the people of God, if you will, being married. As a young man marries a woman, so shall your sons marry you. Picking up at verse 6. On your walls, O Jerusalem, I have set a watchman, all the day and all the night. They shall never be silent. You who put the Lord in remembrance shall take no rest, and give him no rest until he establishes Jerusalem and makes it a praise in the earth. The Lord has sworn by his right hand and by his mighty army, I will not give you your grain to be food for your enemies, and foreigners shall not drink your wine for which you have labored. But those who garner it shall eat it and praise the Lord. And those who gather it shall drink it in the courts of my sanctuary. Go through the gates, prepare the way for the people, build up the highway, clear it of stones, lift up a signal over the peoples. Behold, the Lord has proclaimed to the end of the earth. Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your salvation comes. Behold, your reward is with him, and his recompense before you. And they shall be called the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord. You shall be called sought out, the city not forsaken. Here again, pivotal verse at 10. Very, very important. Go through the gates. Which gates are the people going to go through? It's very important to know that the messianic tradition of this text, the expectation from the time of Isaiah, even into the time of Jesus, and into today, is that the Messiah shall enter Jerusalem through the mercy gates. These are the gates facing eastward. These are the gates that receive the morning sun and glow with a golden hue, also called the Golden Gates. Not a bridge in San Francisco in this era. It is the eastward facing gates of Jerusalem, the gates that you see from the Mount of Olives. And it is a spectacular, stunning view of Jerusalem. Clear it of stones, lift up a signal over the peoples. And that's what's happening on Palm Sunday. That is the word being fulfilled as the people make their way into, as Jesus makes his way into Jerusalem with the people crying out to him. Go back to 21. Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden. This is all fulfilling that prophecy. You have Zechariah, you have Isaiah. You have the expectation that these are going to be the gates entered by the Messiah. The gates are entered by others at this time as well, not just for the Messiah in the era of Jesus, but it's from the Mount of Olives that the crowds have gathered into Jerusalem for the holy celebration. Remember, we're coming up on the Passover and people are traveling so that they can be in Jerusalem for the holy celebration. And there are people then camping on the Mount of Olives in the valley below Jerusalem and coming up onto the Mount of Olives. There people are camping because there's not enough room in the city of Jerusalem. And there Jesus enters through the gates. The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed him. They brought the donkey and the colt and put on them their cloaks, and Jesus sat on them. Most of the crowd, not all, most of the crowd spread their cloaks on the road. Others cut branches from trees and spread them on the road, and the crowds that went before him that followed after him were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And I'm going to stop right there for a moment. All of these things you've seen here fulfill prophecy as well. 2 Kings teaches us that it is when Jehu is anointed king by Elisha that the people lay their cloaks on the ground so that the feet of the king need not tread on the ground shared by common people. Branches are cut from trees. Jesus is welcomed into Jerusalem as one who has been anointed king. And the words that they are shouting come from the Psalms. Hosanna, 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 Hosanna. This is save us now. Hosanna to the Son of David. A celebration and a prayer all at once. And then blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. This is the expectation of the Messiah entering into Jerusalem. Jesus has fulfilled this expectation. And verse 10 continuing now. And when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, Who is this? And the crowd said, This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee. Now, all of this is a fulfillment of prophecy. And that is an amazing statement. All of this is a fulfillment of prophecy. The crowds that are gathered, Jesus beginning from the Mount of Olives, descending now through the valley of Kidron, up into the path that leads to that entry going up and through the mercy gates. He is seen by large crowds that cry out, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. People cut branches from the trees, the palm trees, and set them on the ground. They are treating Jesus as a king, but not everybody knows who he is. Now, perhaps you've had this experience of seeing a motorcade drive by and you wonder who it is that's in town. Years ago, 30 years ago, Mrs. Green and I lived in Richmond, Virginia. I was a graduate student. And one of the things that we did in our home was we welcomed international students. And there was a day, a springtime, about this time of year, actually a little bit later, the cherry blossoms were blooming. It was spectacular. And Mrs. Green and I got together with two students from Ghana, and we drove them up to Washington, D.C. so that we could see the White House. And we toured the White House, and I was planning to take a trip to visit them in their home nation of Ghana within the next year. And I joked with them saying, now when I get to Ghana, you, of course, will arrange for me to have a tour of President Rollins' house. So that was Jerry Rollins was their president then. And they laughed and no one tours our president's home. And so we went through the White House and had a tour. This was the day they told me that I would be student body president. I had no idea. That the international students had decided that I was going to be student body president, and they made it so. It was, God bless them for that. But we're walking down the street after touring the White House, and there's a large crowd at the end of one of the government buildings. And I didn't know what it was, but I told the guys to stop because you could see in a circle driveway, this half moon shaped driveway, there were lots of black Chevy big trucks. Suburbans and Tahoes and such. And they were all black, and the engines were all running, and there were Americans and non-Americans wearing dark suits, talking into their wrist with little earbuds and certain buttons. They all had matching buttons on their lapel. Secret Service and security detail from a foreign country. And I said, I don't know who this is, but it's somebody important. And sure enough, somebody comes through the doors, and people start shouting these halal cries. Oh, it was magnificent. A huge crowd had gathered for this event. I have no idea who that person is. And he stopped and he waved to the crowds, and they cheered all the more. And And he waved, and he just really took in that moment, and then very quickly went down the stairs, got into one of the vehicles in the middle of the motorcade, and off they took with lights and sirens. We were just a couple blocks from the White House, and you could literally stand on the corner where we were and see them making their way up to the White House. It was, oh my gosh, it was a head of state visiting from Middle East, from a North African nation, and oh my goodness, who knew? Things you see in Washington. Well, I tell you that because I had to ask somebody. So who is this? I knew there was a parade. I knew it was a big event. I didn't know who. Likewise, with Jesus going into Jerusalem, crowds are celebrating. This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee. They did not know what was happening. They did not say, this is the Messiah, the Holy Anointed One of God. This is our Savior who will die on a cross and be raised from the dead. This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee. Fascinating how they celebrated the entry of a prophet. Now, surely some, by the way these actions take place, were expecting Jesus to rise up as King of the Jews and restore the Jewish order in Jerusalem. They could not have understood the events yet to come. I digress. What happens immediately after that often gets dropped out from Palm Sunday, and yet it is to understand the sequence of events that lead to the crucifixion. This is absolutely critical, absolutely essential that you keep this in mind. Mention this in your sermon or lesson. What happens next as he goes through those gates and he's from the people and he's in Jerusalem? Jesus makes his way to the Temple Mount. Jesus entered the temple, and he drove out all who sold and bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. And he said to them, it's written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers. And the blind and the lame, they came to Jesus in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying out in the temple, Hosanna to Son of David, they, the chief priests and the scribes, they were indignant. Oh my goodness. Do you hear what these are saying? They're not asking this as a compliment. You do hear this, don't you? With the clear inclination, the intonation that Jesus needs to stop them from crying out because he is not the Messiah, as they expect the Messiah. Jesus healed on Sundays. The Messiah, in their expectation, will honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. But isn't healing keeping the Sabbath day holy? Jesus answered them, yes. Have you never read, out of the mouths of infants and nursing babies, you have prepared praise? Then leaving them, he went out to the city of Bethany, and he lodged there. Okay. We struggle with the identity of Jesus. We struggle with the identity of Jesus. We want to make Jesus warm and fuzzy. Jesus is comforting, and he gives assurance, and he's not mean, never angry. And yet there it is, he drives people out of the temple on that Sunday of his triumphal entry. And that is extremely important to understand. Jesus is taking ownership of the temple. It belongs first, foremost, and only to him. First, foremost, and only to him. Now, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of how this works. These are images. I have copyright permissions to use them. I buy these images with copyright permissions from istockphoto.com. I'm not advertising for them, but if you have copyright questions, you can email me. I know this is going to be on the internet for a long time, so I have the copyright permission. This stays protected forever because I've created it anyway. istockphoto.com. If you need images for your slides, go find them. It's a little pricey, but I never worry about copyright permissions. So Jesus is coming into Jerusalem, and this is how I think we envision it. large crowd surrounding him. He's going through a wide open space, and that may or may not be accurate, but I want you to see what Jerusalem looks like. Now, this is from a model of Jerusalem that's at the Museum of the Shrine. I'm sorry, the Museum of the Book. I think the Shrine of the Book. Boy, I've lost my name of the Dead Sea Scroll Museum in Jerusalem. But this is where you find it. And they have an outdoor model, scale model of what Jerusalem looked like during the era of the Second Temple. This is the time when Jesus would have lived. And so you get a sense here of the temple, the colonnade with the red roof on what is the left. That's going to be the south wall. There is today a mosque in that location. You see the tall stone temple in the middle there. That is today the Golden Dome. That's a monument for the Prophet Muhammad. And the Temple Mount itself is Palestinian territory. Once you go down the steps from the Temple Mount, and the Temple Mount is still standing today. Once you go down the steps from the Temple Mount, then you are you're in Israel again. Very peculiar. Now I want you to see a couple things. On the left-hand side of this picture are steps going down. That is the southern entry into Jerusalem. Those are the steps where the common folk would have led. Some of these steps remain standing today. Not all, but some of them. And some of them remain standing at the gates where the common, ordinary people would have entered into Jerusalem. Those are the gates where Mary and Joseph would have carried Jesus as an infant, where the prophets' words and expectations came fulfilled. And it's deeply moving. Now, those gates have been bricked up because of the weight of the mosque that sits on top of the Temple Mount. It was crushing the walls, so that they had to be bricked up for the structural integrity of the Temple Mount. And then you have the gate you're looking at that's in front of the Temple Mount. So you go up a small ramp, there's a gate, and you look above it, and then there are the temple courts, the temple itself, and then you see the colonnades with the columns all the way around it. This is the Temple Mount as it would have looked in the era of Jesus. The gate you are looking at is called the Mercy Gate. And the expectation of the prophets, the expectation through the ages is that the Messiah will enter through those gates. That is still the expectation held by Jews and Christians alike. That when the Messiah returns, the biblical witness says he will go through those gates. That's the gate Jesus went through on the day of the triumphant entry. So you can see the difference. Now notice as you come out of that gate, you go deep down a ravine, and that ravine is the Kidron Valley. Now that's how it would have looked in the era of Jesus. There already were some, not a lot of graves, but the grave of Absalom, the son of King David, that died, and David lamented him so. The grave of Absalom is just outside of that gate. Today, there are many, many more. I want you to take a couple other looks at how this appears. Now, this again is a photograph, a more recent photograph within the last few years of these same gates. This is the same entry, the same colonnade where Jesus would have gone through. Now you see the two arched gates. That's been rebuilt. The walls came down and it was rebuilt. Those are the Mercy Gates. And when this came under the control of Islamic leaders, at one point, one of them heard that Jews and Christians alike expect the Messiah to make a triumphal entry through those gates. So the leader then had them bricked up from bottom to top. And of course, some of the prophecy is that he will break through the gates. And oh my goodness. Now, you are in the Valley of Kidron looking up to Jerusalem with this photograph. And I want you to see that there are palm trees native to this part of the world. There are dates that grow all over. Date palms are everywhere. And you see olive trees. These are small olive trees. Now, the walls have been restructured outside of Jerusalem for irrigation and for traffic, and for tourists to take photographs like this too, I'm sure. But the photograph you see now was taken from the Mount of Olives, and you're looking up to the Mercy Gates in Jerusalem. Those are the gates that Jesus would have entered. The triumphal entry went through those gates. The parade in Matthew's gospel takes place on this side of the wall. Once Jesus gets to the other side of the wall, he cleanses the temple colonnade. Here is another view looking up to those gates. And now, in addition to all of the brush trees and the olive trees that you see there, you can see the white of the graves. There are hundreds of thousands of graves inhabited with the remains of millions upon millions of people. People can still be buried there. Why? Because the flesh decays from your bones. It all disappears, and then your bones are scooched to one end or placed in a box called an ossuary. And you see these ossuary, they're everywhere. You see them, they're out there. While I was there in Jerusalem, I saw a handful of people being buried here. And it's a temporary resting place, if you will. In the United States, we sink you in the ground. We put concrete vaults over you. We put you in waterproof caskets, guaranteed not to leak for 100 years or some such nonsense. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The earth will reclaim all of that eventually, because it doesn't belong to us anymore. Anyway, people want to be buried here because you are close to the gates where you enter into Jerusalem. This is where the Messiah will enter Jerusalem. Jews believe this. Christians believe this. I certainly believe this. And so the goal here is to be buried close to where you can be when the day of resurrection comes, when that valley of dry bones is restored and life is restored to them, when the Messiah, when time comes to its beautiful conclusion, that's where you want to be standing. And so that's why so many people they go through enormous expense, very expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars to be buried there today. And you thought funerals were expensive where you live. But I wanted you to see that because these graves are there by this gate where the Messiah will enter. Now you get a better view here of the gates, and when you look across the wall, you're actually looking onto the Temple Mount as she stands today. And yes, there are big trees and lots of buildings, but those are the mercy gates. That's where Jesus would have come in his entry, and his grave has been set upon grave upon grave upon grave upon grave. You can see that the Valley of Kidron seems to be filling with graves, but it is still the Valley of Kidron. Now, this is what it looked like. Again, this is the Temple Mount. So when Jesus enters into Jerusalem, what does he do? He goes to the Temple Mount and he drives out the people that are sitting in all of these colonnades. He drove out all who sold and bought in the temple, Matthew 21, picking up at verse 12. Those salespeople would be in tables in front of the colonnades. There would be people selling food, an enormous commercial enterprise taking place up here on the Temple Mount. My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. There was a very sophisticated economic system in play here where you would exchange your currency for their currency. And then with their currency, you would buy animals that would then be sacrificed. And then these animals, part of the sacrifice, part of the animal is disposed of, the entrails and such. Some is burned on fire, some is an offering to God, and then some is available to eat. And so then they make money when they exchange your currency. They make money when you buy the animal. Then you're looking for lunch, and they make money when they sell you something to eat. And all of this is from the view of the outside. But Jesus then drives people off of this colonnade, and children are still shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna to the Son of David. The chief priests and the scribes will hear nothing of this. And Jesus says they are crying out. This is a closer view of the temple in the holiest of holies. And you see more common homes and houses behind this. And it begins here with this triumphal entry into Jerusalem. It begins here with the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. So if you are teaching or preaching this text, if you are reading this devotionally, what do you need to take away from this? Number one, the people are acting in a spontaneous, impromptu manner. They are making the decision to see Jesus entering and to celebrate him as an anointed king. That's spontaneous and it is sincere. Number two, God had predicted these events, had foretold of them through the prophets, literally century upon century before these events happened. It is spontaneous and simultaneously it is planned. People ask me all the time, because I do believe in predestination, are we destined, or do we have free will, or are we destined? Yes, the biblical witness here is clear. The people respond spontaneously, and the prophets foretold of this event. And the third thing you need to take away from this is that the crowds are not of one mind. There is the crowd celebrating the entry of the king. There is the crowd celebrating the arrival of the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee. There is the crowd that suspects he is a ne'er-do-well. Keep in mind, messiahs would enter Jerusalem every few years. Somebody would declare themselves Messiah. They would enter into Jerusalem. The Romans would kill them. End of story. And that is what many expect to happen here. Some actually believe Jesus will sit upon the throne in the temple and restore the kingdom of David, overtaking the power of Rome. And others think he is a fraud. The Messiah is not him. Certainly the chief priests and the scribes have reached that conclusion. And now you're going to see the events unfold. So on Sunday morning, one crowd cries out to celebrate Jesus. When you get to Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, you will hear crowds shouting things that are quite different. I encourage you, take time and just search in your search engine for the phrase Jerusalem model, Jerusalem model. And take some time looking at photographs of that model in Jerusalem. The museum very graciously allows you to take unlimited photographs on the outside without copyright restriction. What an amazing gift that is. Now, people who take their photographs and sell them, they do own the copyright to those photos. Do not steal other people's work. Do not steal their work. Pay for your copyright permissions. But look for these online. Here's what I want you to see is that Jesus is in a confined area, but there's a lot of walking that takes place from the upper room to the Garden of Gethsemane, which is on the Mount of Olives, down the Garden of Gethsemane up to the Pilate's temple, which today is a school for Muslim children. I'll give you a story later about somebody that got to visit. One of the best stories I've ever heard of one of the best stories I've ever heard of anyone in Jerusalem. Well, the quick aside is somebody on a free day with a tour group bought some old coins from a salesman who asked, if you're a Christian, have you heard of Pilate's courts where Jesus was taken for his trial? And he said, yes, but I know I'm not allowed there. And he said, I take you. And because this man had just bought coins from a vendor, the vendor then left his son in charge of the store and took my friend and his wife to go and visit, which is now a playground with basketball hoops up for children enrolled in this school. All of them are Islamic children. But then you go from there to the house of Caiaphas, where Jesus is literally dropped in a pit. That's where he's imprisoned. That's where you hear the rooster crowing the third time, and Peter's denial is fulfilled there. There's a lot of walking that takes place. There's a lot of ground that is covered. And then where Jesus is whipped, and then the Via Dolorosa, the way of pain. Parts of it are wide, parts of it are very narrow. When Jesus is forced to carry his cross, there are places where he would be pushing through a crowd. By then, he's already been whipped in the skin from the base of his neck to above his knees. all of that skin would have been removed from his body. There's going to be a sight, a smell, a very visceral presence of Jesus. And it's not what one thinks of with a king. Watch and see the path to crucifixion. Take time now before it gets crazy and look at the two crucifixion sites. There's one revered by the Roman Catholic and many Orthodox churches, with which the walls of Jerusalem extended. It's now within those walls of Jerusalem. There's also what's called the Garden Tomb, which is maintained by the Church of England, and others believe that's where the crucifixion took place. Take time and look during Holy Week at the exceptional amount of suffering that Jesus, who on Sunday is hailed as a king, will be forced to drag his cross through crowds that are belittling him, having been whipped within an inch of his life. The smells, the brutality, the sounds, the suffering that takes place. Easter's coming. Don't make the mistake of just jumping from now, don't make the mistake of jumping. Back up, say that again. Easter is coming. Don't make the mistake of jumping from Maundy Thursday. I've gotten that completely wrong every time now. Let's try that yet again. Take next. Easter is coming. Don't make the mistake of jumping from the triumphal entry of Jesus straight to Easter, from one parade to the next celebration, because in the week are all of the events that give us hope, that give us life. By his wounds, we are healed, is what the prophet Isaiah says. Allow yourself time to live in that suffering that Jesus endured. I'm David Green. This is the Pastor Abilities podcast and Bible study. This has been a long one. We've covered a lot of territory, literally and figuratively. You've made it this far. Go ahead and smash like on the video. And if you would subscribe, I know you're not watching live. I know that's almost all of my viewers watch recordings at times of your leisure, which is great. But I've covered today not just material for Palm Sunday, but this is also a setup for Maundy Thursday and Good Friday. The work you put into your study today from the Gospel of Matthew will pay dividends later in the course of next week. Pace yourself during Holy Week, preachers and teachers. Pace yourself. It's a busy week. Save the best of yourself for Easter Sunday. You and your congregation deserve that. Save the best of yourself for Easter Sunday. For all of our Bible teachers and preachers, I pray God bless you. For everyone else who has endured and sat through this Bible study, thank you as well. May God bless you and yours on this week. Thanks.